Hello, everybody. I would like to thank everyone for taking your time today. This issue is becoming more important due to that it's becoming a little more prevalent in certain areas. So once again, thank you for taking your time today for this, our statewide anti-tampering webinar. As she said, my name is Dave. My name is David Alspaugh. I'm a supervisor with the Ohio EPA, and I'm in the Division of Air Pollution in the Mobile Sources section. So mobile sources, car issues. So you can see how this is apropos for me. So a quick overview of what we're going to be going over today. I'm going to cover the laws, the administrative code, the Ohio Revised Code administrative code that covers what I'm discussing. We're going to go over what's considered tampering, what isn't, typical types of tampering you may see, possible signs of tampering, other prohibitions that are under the law that you can and cannot do, and we'll discuss a little bit what if you have a tampered vehicle, and briefly enforcement. So first, the Ohio Administrative Code, or OAC. The first part defines the various parts, what are emission systems or what are this. But the one that lists the actual prohibitions and the definition of tampering, well, you will see in the Ohio Administrative Code 3745-80-02. That's the second one. And similar to the Ohio Administrative Code, the Ohio Revised Code, same thing. It's going to give you the definitions of various phrases and the definition of tampering. So what is tampering? What is that definition? Tampering is defined as removing, bypassing, defeating, or rendering inoperative in whole or in part any emissions control system on a vehicle. What's that mean? You can't take off a part that's part of the emission system. So you can't take off a catalytic converter. You can't use devices that will bypass how it works. And we'll go over some of that soon. Before we do, but what is an emissions part? It can be a little difficult to define, but I will do my best here. It's basically going to be any part or system that works to reduce vehicle tailpipe emissions. Everybody is aware of the most obvious part, typically the catalytic converter, but even the check engine light is part of the emissions system. So removal of that or taping over it would be tampering. And it can be broad at times, but in general, if a part or its removal causes the check engine light to come on, it could be considered tampering with the emissions system. What are some of the typical types of tampering we see out there? The catalytic converter the most often. It's removed, it can be hollowed out. You'll see non-US EPA or California Air Resources Board approved catalytic converters, or even dual exhaust installed. And that would be something, a true dual exhaust, straight back from each side of the motor, each manifold all the way back. With diesels, you'll see the EGR and EGR cooler delete kits, along with the DPF, the diesel particulate filter, and the SCR, the selective cat reduction system, removed in addition to the converter. You may also see high-performance equipment installed, like high-flow intakes, cheaters or spacers for O2 sensors, or even reprogrammed ECMs or the computer, which a lot of people call tunes. What's not tampering? In general, once again, exhaust change is done after the catalytic converter. Engine swaps, perfectly legal, where the vehicle can meet the original model year standards. So like newer model motors would not be considered tampering if you're putting into an older vehicle, unless you're trying to put a truck engine into a car. Also, What's not tampering? Performance parts that are US EPA or California Air Resources Board approved. And just a note on that, that will be on the packaging. You need to be aware when you're buying parts, if you're buying performance parts, that they state these things. The phrase 50 state legal should kind of raise your eyebrows, or anything that says for off-road use only. Also, what's not considered tampering? Malfunctioning parts or malmaintenance. If the part is present but it's just not working, maybe it rotted, has rusted away, or like you can see holes in the converter, we're not going to consider that tampering. Different tires, parking brakes, other dash lights, or loud or no mufflers. That is not under our jurisdiction of the anti-tampering law. And when we're doing our inspections, a rule of thumb is if we're not 100% sure, it's not tampering. Now, one thing to note, I mentioned that it can get a little strange or broad, but different tires won't necessarily be considered tampering, but it could trigger a check engine light if you are putting too large of tire or too big of a tire change, because you've got a part in the system that will actually realize the speed is off and could trigger a check engine light. So you may want to be aware of that before making any large changes. So, possible signs of tampering. These are good for if, before you take a car in for trade, or if you are at an auction, or you are making a repair. So, modified cars and trucks should raise a red flag, like lowriders, or what I like to call the Fast and the Furious, raised trucks, or diesels with stacks blowing coal. Those are kind of on the rise right now. If you're not sure what it is, if you go on YouTube, rolling or blowing coal, you'll see excellent examples of what I'm talking about. Consider also muscle or sport cars, like Mustangs, Chargers, Corvettes. Individuals like to tune these vehicles, make them their own performance vehicle. And when you're doing a once-over of a vehicle, if you see chrome exhaust, parts missing under the hood, colorful new parts, or changes to the intake, it's time to be vigilant. And no car is really out of the question, since I've seen videos about a smart car with a turbo installed. So, what are the other things the law prohibits? So, we're not allowed to tamper with a vehicle, and typically dealerships are not the ones doing the tampering. The major part of the law that would affect the dealer is the portion that addresses that it is illegal to knowingly sell a vehicle in tampered condition, and that is under the Ohio Administrative Code that I have listed there. Now, you'll notice one of the parts of that under knowingly sell, lease, rent, or offer to sell is offer to transfer title or right to possession of a motor vehicle that has been tampered with. That would include a trade-in. But you're saying, what about an as-is sale? As-is and warranty laws do cover dealers, but those are general rules and laws. Our anti-tampering law addresses specific things, and they are specifically addressing the prohibition or that it is illegal to sell a vehicle that is tampered, and that law takes precedent over any as-is laws. So you will not be protected by an as-is rule. What if you now have a tampered vehicle? As mentioned in the law, you're unable to sell that vehicle. To legally sell any vehicle that is tampered, you have to put a salvage title on that vehicle. You're saying this vehicle is not, once you put a salvage title, it is not roadworthy. So once you put a salvage title on it, you're selling it for parts. If you want to resell it with no salvage title, the only way you can sell it is you must repair the emission system back to its original configuration. If it comes into your shop or your dealership for repair, you can work on that vehicle, but you are limited. You may only work on any system or part not related to that tampering. As a simple example, if the converter's been removed, you could place on a new muffler, but if the entire exhaust needed to be replaced, the only way you could do that repair is you would have to put it back to its original configuration, converter and all. And you have the same rights, especially as a dealer. You have the same rights, though, as any purchaser under the law. This means if you received a vehicle in on trade or purchased it at an auction, you're allowed under the law to take independent legal action to rescind the sale and or recover damages from the entity that brought the vehicle for sale to the auction, not the auction. The auction is just simply a intermediary. Also, one thing to take note that I just thought about is if that person bringing it to the auction is not in the state of Ohio, you would have to take your complaint or your lawsuit to that state. You can only go through Ohio or file complaints with us if that seller is in Ohio. So how do we enforce these laws? The Ohio EPA or its representatives can, by complaint or just random visits, inspect repair shops, dealers, fleets, and any vehicles present for sale or repair on the lot for tampering. We will also go and take a look at any documents related to the work or sales, and we will go back as far as 6 months if necessary. Once the inspection is done, a list of our findings will be provided to you with a reasonable time for you to respond. So within that short time after the inspection, you receive a letter of warning or even a notice of violation depending on how bad the situation is, and it will instruct you what action you will have to take and in what time period. Typically, you'll be given a period of time to correct the tampering or prove the vehicles have been salvaged, and that'll usually be relative to what we're finding. If fines are to be levied, the law allows for $500 up to $2,500 for each day out of violation. So, you've got a vehicle in on trade, or you've got a shop, and you're trying to figure out what is this vehicle even supposed to have on it. If you have things like all data or any manuals, those are good places to go. But the best place to go is the vehicle emissions control information label. I got it up as component inventory, but I made a mistake typing that up. So, but go to what is called the VECI label. If you ever hear it, we always call it the VECI label. That label will be found in the engine area of the vehicle, but the locations vary by manufacturer. They can be on the hood, they can be on the motor, they could be on the driver's side, they can be on the passenger side. They could even be on the air filter box with some manufacturers, which that can make it difficult if that's been removed. So I have some examples of vehicle emissions control labels. Some of the things that I'm going to point out is the location of where you're seeing, because they can vary. That's one reason I'm showing the acronyms and what they mean. If you'll notice, immediately right away you see SFI, the EGR, et cetera. Those are the emissions components. That will tell you immediately on the surface of like what the vehicle should have. So you'll see the various things, the things that we're going to be sequential fuel injection is part of the emission system, but that would mostly be something that you would see if somebody's put a different motor in, like they went from this type of motor to maybe carburation. The exhaust gas recirculation valve, air fuel sensors, those are kind of fancy oxygen sensors. You'll notice under the warm-up, the WUTWC, that there's a number in front of that that's actually telling you how many converters there are, and same thing for the oxygen sensors. So you'll see this vehicle is actually equipped with 3 catalytic converters. The other thing I want you to take note of is the word California. That just because a vehicle is in Ohio doesn't mean that vehicle can be altered from its original configuration. It must meet its original configuration. So if you think you're going to put a part on here because it's not in California anymore, I'm going to put on a regular, like 49 state part, you could trigger the check engine light first of all, and that can be considered tampering because you have altered the original configuration, thus bypassing, rendering inoperative some part of the emission system. I threw in some other newer vehicles just so you can see what other manufacturers do. There's no consistency. They can be put anywhere. Some of them will tell you right away. Once again, you can see the acronyms there, and I've try to define what each one of those are. Direct fuel injection, by the way, that's something new. Once again, if you're looking at an older vehicle, you're looking at a motor that you know should not have a carburetor, and you see a carburetor now, and it says something like direct fuel injection, sequential fuel injection, things like that, we already have a problem. Just some more new ones here. This one I pulled out because of the WR in front of that hot heated oxygen sensor. That just stands for wide range. Some of the letters before certain parts I would ignore as long as you got the major parts like three-way, like TWC. You may even see OC for like oxidation cat. Or you have like this one, they just come right out and tell you it has a catalyst. And they're telling you what kind. Once again, you'll notice I circled California regulations. It conforms to California, and this vehicle is in Ohio. Now we're going to go on to some trucks. So you can see once again what it's got: heated oxygen sensors, an EGR system, three-way cat, and a sequential fuel injection. Now you'll also notice that not everybody told you how many cats there were. Some go really in depth, so you'll know it has 2, 3. Some they'll just say it's got a catalytic converter and you won't know how many. That's when you might need to go to a book. Here is some diesels. This is pretty important because once again, this is something that I mentioned earlier. This is something that is on the rise. The turbocharger is TC. That direct diesel injection, the charged air cooling system, and then you'll see that EGR, which is this is something that, as I mentioned earlier, is removed quite often. You'll see that PTOX, which is also another name for a diesel particulate filter. That's a periodic trap oxidizer. It's for cleaning up particulate. And then the selective catalyst reduction system. Depending on what letters you see after it will be if it's using urea or ammonia. And then we have even odder ones, like this one from a Chrysler product. It's a Cummins diesel. You'll see the field where it says catalyst number. If the vehicle is equipped with a catalyst, they will place the part number in that field. If there is no number, it is not equipped with one. And to make it more complicated, they use 2 kinds. So this is oriented. I know, I apologize, but I oriented it so you can see it's typically not going to be horizontal. It'll be vertical, and it's made of metal rather than a sticker, and it's riveted to the motor. And it's made out of metal because it's riveted to the motor and that close to the cooling system. If you notice in the circle where it says catalyst number, there is no number, so this vehicle is not equipped with a catalyst. All right. We'll be taking a short break, and then we will try to address as many of your questions as we can. And you see my contact information, so if it doesn't come up, if I don't cover it, I see the questions we have. If it's not covered, feel free to give me a call, all right? All right, the first one we got is what prompted the inspection and $40,000 fine of a Northern Ohio dealership? All right, there were vehicles observed by our field offices, and there were complaints received, so that is what triggered that inspection. But as I mentioned, there are random inspections. So some of our offices and local air agencies will do random inspections. They do not have to be directed as if we've received a complaint. When and where and how will the Ohio be inspecting for this? I kind of just covered that a little bit. When is, the only thing about the when is that probably would restrict us would be we'd only go when your businesses are open, when the dealership is open. But we go anywhere. It's statewide. Probably one thing I didn't mention is a lot of individuals tend to think that the anti-tampering program is something that's related to our emissions test program called E-Check in Northeast Ohio. It's not. It is statewide. So if any one of our local field offices or local air agencies receive a complaint, there can be an inspection. Someone asked, what if a dealership unknowingly sells a tampered vehicle? The key to the law is knowingly sell a tampered vehicle. When I've had someone explain that to me, that they didn't know, that one dealership stated that they did a full multi-point inspection. If you're doing a multi-point inspection, I would assume you are looking at that vehicle, and if you're selling it unknowingly, then you might want to take the time to get a little more training so that you know what equipment a vehicle should have before you sell it. That's about it. All right, what steps should be required at a dealership to inspect a vehicle for tampering? I kind of gave some of that. I don't know if it's required, but since you're going to take it in on trade, you're going to be responsible for that vehicle. So I would give the a once-over. Take a look at that vehicle. Someone's bringing it in. There should be some triggers. As I mentioned, if you see trucks like high-rise trucks, sports cars, low-riders, fast and furious, those things ought to make you take a moment to inspect the vehicle. And we've seen the tampering very blatant. Actually advertised at some of the auctions. One dealership pointed out to us that the vehicles that are coming to auction have it written on the windshield. So we saw vehicles with EGR delete written on the windshield. So whoever purchased that vehicle knew it had something removed at the time. Somebody said, does E-Check look for this tampering? The E-Check is what we call our tailpipe emissions program in the 7 counties in Northeast Ohio around the Cleveland-Akron area. Yes, we do. That is one reason it comes up much faster in Northeast Ohio than in the rest of the state. But we're seeing a lot of tampering on the rise, and we're seeing it advertised. So we just see it by going at advertised vehicles, and they advertise exactly what they've removed from the vehicle.
Thank you for taking the time out of your morning to attend this. We hope you found the information helpful. If you could take just a couple minutes to complete our 10-minute, 10 questions just to give us feedback on the webinar, on content, on future webinars you'd like to see, we would appreciate it. With that, we'll end the webinar, and thank you and have a great day.